The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. All the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
This is News Talk.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then.
What about your start to the game? It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Oh.
So, Scotland are good. That's some headline news. If you haven't seen it, they beat Spain 2-0. Robert Grieve of the Scottish Sun is going to join us and explain all. Scott McTominay with both goals, no less. Meanwhile, Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent, who was alongside me at the Aviva Stadium on Monday evening, is now here in studio. Daniel, hello.
Joe, it's a pleasure to be close to you again.
Indeed. If you want cutting-edge pre-match analysis, Off the Ball on Monday evening was the place to be, believe it or not. Let me just play you a brief snippet. Here we go. And there was plenty more where that came from.
Dan, which French player is going to score from 35 yards tonight?
Oh God, yeah. I think the French mindset towards the game is very interesting.
Don't discount.
Analysis.
Okay. Are you saying this is a freakish statistical anomaly,
Pavard,
or it's happening too often?
What's the highest ranked team we've conceded a goal against like that, Joe? I don't think we're going to have that problem. Listen, play this back to me.
You did hear Pavard in the middle of that, to be clear. I did give the answer. Yeah.
Play this back to me. I don't think we'll have that kind of problem. You wouldn't even answer my question initially.
I'm just saying, my Pavard. I'm gonna sort of do the politician here. I'm gonna focus on the positive line in the press release. It's like I'm just gonna drive it home. It's like, who else would have picked Pavard, right? Everyone would have just pick your sort of marquee French names. I was like, it's going to be Pavard. That's who it's going to be. It's always a full back in that type of game.
And your press conference or your press release would exclude you saying, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Play it back to me.
Yeah, that was slightly problematic. But I can get around it.
Massage around that.
I didn't think it was going to be a problem. I mean, it was a different type of long range concession that it wasn't a slow 15-second build up or like players tracking back and think, you might have a crack here. No. It was instant death. But it did strike me straight away that this one, it was brilliant that I did pick Pavard, but two, I did say Pavard basically in the event of it not being anyone at all, really.
Yes. My phone did beep.
Yeah.
Dan McDonnell appeared on my home screen. A message from Dan. I wonder what he's texting about. So there we are. It was very unfortunate. I don't think I agree with your point, by the way. It's not necessarily in keeping with the build up to the previous long range goals where there was a lack of urgency on Ireland's part. However, it was just so demoralising. And Cullen, of all players, who is pretty careful on the ball, in fairness to him.
I think I'd also said last week that Cullen not being there was an issue with some of these long range shots. So him providing the assist for one was a sort of just not the way you might have expected that to happen.
To be fair to Pavard, anticipation, sharpness and strike to match. I mean, you're talking about high quality players everywhere in this French team. Give us the overview on Ireland. Then we've obviously talked with Vinnie Perth and Gavin Cooney yesterday. People might have heard the podcast. I would say in broad terms they were very positive with how Stephen Kenny set the team up. They were pretty positive in terms of the application. Certainly Vinny felt we could have done more in terms of creating chances and been a bit more aggressive in our passing at times, but he did concede. France are very scary. It's easier said than done. On the whole, perfectly acceptable first start was the general verdict.
Yeah, it's hard to get away from, just for me personally anyway, it's hard to get away from a general sense of deflation because that lingering sense of having been here before after the encouraging, if only, defeat. And clearly this is probably the best one of them because it's the best team Ireland have played by some distance. Having got to watch a lot of France at the World Cup. And the thing about France is as well, I know people would say, and I understand it, and I did hear your chat with the lads, and I think Gavin Cooney was saying he was quite impressed by France, and I do get that. I think they're not a team even at the World Cup that blew people away. They're more sort of They're pretty clinical, you know, like even some of those games in the World Cup against Poland, and like, it's not as if they're wowing you. Like I don't think in the World Cup, I could be wrong, it was more a sense of respect for France. Like even in the England game, yeah, you know, but they had their let-offs in that game too. You know, Morocco caused them loads of problems, but it was more the sense of these are the killers. So the fact that they came to Dublin and did that, it's not a sense to me of, France were miles off their levels. I think it's more a case of that's what they do, and Ireland actually probably neutralised elements of what they do very well. So I think that's good. It's just for me, there's that small bit of knowing that, like, when you have no points on the board, like it was bonus point territory if Ireland got anything. I really, you know, particularly with the Dutch situation, I was like, 1 point could be so important. You don't have that. You're back to Greece game being everything, which is where we were beforehand. But I suppose the one thing I think about a lot of these heroic Irish defeats, there's been a game 3 days later where it kills the buzz straight away. There's now like 3 months to sort of deal with this, and at least it means there'll be full focus on the next match, whereas sometimes the games that have killed Ireland have been the secondary focus in a week, and that's actually what's hurt them.
Did you like how Kenny set up the team?
Yeah, I definitely could understand it. I don't think I wasn't particularly surprised by it. In the sense that I think the Ogbenny one was a natural one for this type of game. The one question mark I still have, and it lingers, what would have happened if O'Dowda was there? Because it was very clear that O'Dowda was going to play from the comments. I could be wrong, but it seemed pretty clear to me that he would. And would that have impacted? Would that have had a domino effect on other situations? I mean, it looks to me like I would imagine that Seamus Coleman was tasked for that job, given how diligently he carried it out, but we don't know for sure. Would Matt Doherty just have been dropped? Possibly that's the case. Did that take away a degree of pace on that side of the pitch that you would have wanted? And it sort of tallies. Like Kenny last week after the Latvia game before O'Dowda was injured was talking about how speed was going to be so important in this game. And like the Irish side say wouldn't have been packed with speedy players, you know, and like O'Dowda would have been one more. I mean, Ogbenny excelled because of that. Knight is quite quick, but you know, would it have been as conservative in parts if O'Dowda had been there in terms of breaking out? I'd imagine Coleman wouldn't have been going too far with Mbappe, but would they have been a little bit braver on the other side at times? And Doherty did try to be. On 1 or 2 occasions, but he's more of a build-up player rather than an outlet player, you know what I mean, that provides a run. So I think the subs were fine. I think the subs have been a question mark under Kenny in recent games. We've probably talked about them here. I think the Ida change was a good one. A lot of people are probably going, not sure about this because Ferguson's coming off, but Ida did stretch them a bit. And one thing I've taken away from it is I think I might have thought that Ida and Ferguson would be head to head, but actually they could be a partnership at some stage too. So there was a lot good to take away from it. It's just that sense now again of, okay, it's making that conversion to orchestrating a game plan that effective for a game Ireland need to win, which has been the issue so far. They've been very good at creating game plans for games where people are going in going, just what happens if they got hammered here? That's never happened. Like that has not happened at all. Like not losing by more than 1 goal. But becoming the sort of the clinical killers like France are that are going to do a job in the group. I don't think anything you've seen on Monday answers that question for you definitively going, well, that's that corner turn. That's the big question mark that's still there.
So your logic on Ferguson Ida partnership is you got the hold of play of Ferguson and he'll be better for having experience Monday night, and Ida with that running thread in behind which was so visible even on Monday night. There's a balance there which works.
I'm not saying it's the most natural partnership. You would say that the Ferguson Obafemi one might have the most potential in a game where you would maybe think Ireland have more of the ball and the strikers will be a bit closer together, and in terms of like maybe their technical skills and how they could complement each other. But maybe for a particular, I suppose, a grade down from that type of game, you know, you could see that being an option. And like I think Kenny likes Ida generally, and like sometimes the football move whirls on very quickly from a player who comes along as a young player, has a little bit of a dodgy patch, and then they tend to be sort of written out of discussions. Like, I mean, Adam Ida, 18 months ago was exceptionally good in Faro against a decent Portugal side, and in the home game in Dublin as well. And that January, February was playing very well for Norwich in the Premier League, scored a goal against Everton, looked like he was going to play the rest of the season, and then, as has been the case with him, got a bad injury. You tend to forget about him very quickly when he's only 21, 22, and like has attributes there that can make him a feature in certain games. And I think there is probably the one positive, the major positive you could argue out the last year, even if there's been low points within it, is that there probably does feel like there's a certain depth within the squad now. Like there's clearly a couple of players who got injured who would, if they got injured before June, you'd be like pretty stressed. But there are other areas of the team where you could probably go, okay, he's gone, but we have him. And I think there's still, Josh Cullen ironically made the mistake the other night. He's probably still the hardest player to replace, you could argue. But in other positions, there's good options, and I think that's probably one of the encouraging things that you would take from it. That Kenny did go on about this, about building a squad for the Euros. To be fair, I think he's done that. But clearly, that squad now just needs to go on and just change the story of their arc, which is again so near but yet so far.
What was Kenny saying in the press conference?
Yeah, I think after actually. I think before and after the game, I think sometimes with Kenny, like after a game, it feels like a lot of even some of the punditry veers into like analysing his press conference words. Like if the performance has been reasonably good, then it veers into, well, what did he say in his press conference? How does this relate to what he said in his press conference? Like maybe that's always the way. Maybe under Trapp and previous managers, we all talked about what they said. Steve Staunton, a win is a win. Like, managers' lines, okay, they always get thrown back at them. But it does feel like with Kenny then that, things went reasonably well, and then there's a sense of, well, he said beforehand they were going to have a go, and this is almost like an issue, whereas, and we've been here loads, like I've always made the point that Kenny is more pragmatic than sometimes his own utterances would have you know. Like Dundalk in 2016 in the Europa League never lost by more than one goal. There's actually huge parallels. Some great performances but not wins, in some cases. So his teams are always competitive, and you have to be pragmatic to be competitive. If you're not, you'd have a track record of getting opened up 3 or 4 regularly. So there is a pragmatism there. So I actually thought, while there was 1 or 2 lines before the game that were seized upon, I thought his general tone actually before and after was pretty straight down the line. It wasn't too bigger picture in a way. Yes, there will be lines about, this is, we have built a good team now, but not as bullish as we've seen previously, coming in after the Qatar friendly and talking about winning the Nations League and that type of thing. It was a little bit more between the lines. He did speak about Evan Ferguson, that would have been carried in the papers today, would have maybe offered the view that he felt actually Ferguson made life hard for himself by dropping deep a little bit too much. And we certainly, anyone who watched Ferguson on the pitch, and I'm sure some people would have been just tracking him, scouts, and people having a look at him, would have noticed that he spent a lot of time probably in between the halfway line and the Irish penalty box, or certainly, the 35 yards from goal. Kenny's point was that they ideally would have wanted Ferguson higher up. Now, of course, that can be communicated, and like there's obviously, clearly Ferguson felt he was needed back there, and that was the nature of the game. Maybe you're just forced back, that you feel like you need to be there. But that was one of the more interesting observations about it, because Ferguson's probably never played in a game like that before.
Well, I felt he was conscious of Camavinga.
Yeah.
And quite rightly so.
Yeah, sitting on top of him.
It's understandable. Now, I agree with you. It's not the most complicated message to get onto him if you want him a bit further up the pitch either. So
yeah, I mean, Kenny's point about he did like last week, the most animated Kenny probably was this week, was talking about Brighton's system last week, and he got really into the Brighton system. He's never seen anything like this 4-2-4, and sort of said that the job for Ferguson is to just sit to the left or the right of their number 6, which I suppose in the French case was Camavinga. So there was an element of habits. It's just when Ferguson does that for Brighton, he's got Matoma and March, 2 wingers bombing on either side of him, and clearly not with Ireland. But I think Kenny in general knows, like he knows that there's a big focus on Athens. There always was going to be a big focus on Athens. There's parallels with last year, where the first game Now, it was a bit different because there was 4 games in that big window, the sort of mad Nations League window, whereas this is probably built around one, and then the Gibraltar one as the afterthought. But the preparations weren't right last year, and I think instantly for Armenia, he's jumped on to how do you get that right. But he was saying behind the scenes last week was the best week so far in his time. He didn't really elaborate on why that was, but he did suggest that the week and how it had panned out had gone better than ever, which just adds the extra frustration that they just didn't get that little cherry on top of just getting that point that could be so important later down the line.
It was an incredibly organised performance. They were all exceptionally drilled. They all knew what they were about and what they were trying to do, and they carried it out to the nth degree. You would definitely have liked to touch more aggression in the passing for sure, and the left-hand side didn't offer anything, and what was asked of Knight possibly didn't suit him, certainly not with Doherty behind him. They're minor-ish quibbles, I think, in the face of how good France just so obviously were. That more defensive shape made perfect sense against France. So if Greece away is being talked about already as a defining game early on in this campaign, what kind of shape does he go with in Athens?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things about Athens. I think there's been a big chat around, and it's been pointed out in a few places, like a big chat around the heat for that game, but it does now appear the game's at 9:45 p.m. local time, so I think it will be considerably cooler than the daytime temperatures. Now, it's still going to be warm, but and again, predicting weather a long way off is dangerous. But it's not. It's
so when it's Athens in the summer.
Well, I get you, yeah, and we can get Johnny Ward in about climate if you want as well. But I think like Yerevan last year was a 5 o'clock game. It was 2 o'clock Irish time. It was a TV thing. This is like late at night local time. Well, it just means it's not going to be. I'm sure it's still going to be demanding, but it's not going to be that afternoon heat which killed them in Yerevan and exposed players who hadn't played in a long period of time. But I would imagine that there will be elements of the game plan that could be similar enough in the sense of, I suppose, needing to conserve your energy and not run yourself into the ground needlessly. Like what you don't do. The conditions are going to be warm enough. I'm just saying it's not going to be like nothing they've ever experienced before. So there's an element of managing your workloads and sort of knowing, I suppose, when to press and when not to press. I think the other night they obviously weren't chasing around the place, like tearing around the place just to get caught up in the occasion. But I think you would imagine in that game though, you're not going to be telling your wing backs, you're not going to have a wing back sort of reluctant to cross the halfway line because of a superstar. And like in that system, like that Ireland play, and I think they'll retain that system for sure for Greece, like the width comes from your wing backs, and if they're not actually providing a threat, then you end up becoming sort of quite one-dimensional in the sense of you're being stuck through the middle and you're looking for people to pick Hollywood passes to try and get things going.
Do you think just Ferguson up top on his own?
No. He could switch to the 3-5-2.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said he'll keep the same shape.
No, sorry. When I mean shape, no, you're right. I more so mean the back 3, back 4 thing. There is this debate of will they at any point pivot away from that, but I don't think they will for that game. Will against Gibraltar in one of these games, they might trial it. Who knows? They might, Greece at home later in the year. Might you want something different? Who knows? But I think within the system, they mix it up anyway. Like the thing is, it's no guarantee, for example, that someone like O'Benny, who was fantastic the other night, will play in Greece. I would say that now. And like he was exceptionally good the other night. Malumbi also very good the other night. But is it possible that like they're the subject of dilemmas around starting place for Greece? I would say possibly so, because you might suddenly say, well, you want to get a small bone in there who's maybe a little bit more creative. So who comes out? Okay, it could be Jason Knight, right? That's another option. But Ogbene, is it a case of no, maybe it's more about the Ferguson Obafemi for this particular game, and Ogbene would lose out because he's not going to be a right wing back, but he's not going to be one of your midfield 3 if you tweak things. And like that's even Ogbene and his quotes after were very good. He did sort of say, he almost alluded to it, like this isn't to say, I'm sure privately he's like, well, it was brilliant, of course I should be playing, but he did acknowledge that it could be different thing for different games. Whereas again, like Ireland go to France in September, there's no way Ogbene wouldn't play in that one. And I'd imagine he could actually end up playing maybe in the Dutch games as well, but Greece could be a slightly different one.
Yeah. it's one of the great skills of management to try and gauge the opposition. France, it's a no-brainer. We can all gauge where France are perfectly. We need to be solid beyond belief. Greece, away, how do we pitch up against them exactly? How aggressive do we approach it? That is the skill, and that's what Stephen Kenny will be doing in the intervening months. Certainly, I would say Doherty Knight just doesn't really work if they're going with that formation.
Well, I think like Doherty played a lot of football when he was younger at left back at Wolves, but like he was very good in Portugal when at that stage would have been, I think, Jamie McGrath inside him actually. And the nature of the game, you know, he can cut in and build play. But I don't know, like, yeah, I know what you're saying about it. Like, I think Knight is a good player, but he is one that he's sort of maybe, like, you saw me come off the bench in Luxembourg when the game was being very congested, and he really opened it up and was very effective. And maybe if there's a game where you're looking for a little bit more control on the ball, he is one that becomes. He could have that Doherty small bone link on the other side.
Yeah,
like he had in
Knight can do lots of things, and he can also, as he showed against Ukraine, I remember like the greatest opening 15 minutes in that home game against Ukraine, where he must have had 2 or 3 brilliant runs and beat players and started so well. So he can take the ball and he can run at players if he's feeling good. And I think he could pick a pass. Like, I could have imagined, for instance, if it was O'Dowda behind Knight, I could have imagined Knight getting on the ball and a little flick here or a pass there for O'Dowda on the overlap. He did it once for Doherty. It was beautiful. Like, it was a really difficult. It was a high tariff outside of the foot first time flick for Doherty, and it worked. But I'd never felt Knight had Doherty bombing by him for obvious reasons all that often. One, because of the opposition, but two, because I don't know. I'm not sure on Doherty a lot of the time. I feel like there's more in him. But anyway, regardless, whatever's going on there, I think Knight needs a bit of pace around him in that kind of an environment. Yeah,
the other thing I suppose I would say, I mean, again, Ireland were chasing the game late on, so it's a little bit, not to analyse it too much, but even that little change that Coleman went to the right of the 3 and Nathan Collins went to the other side. And it wouldn't surprise me if there was any issues with anyone in the back 3 that Coleman went into the right of the 3 very easily. In fact, could he end up playing the right of the 3 in Greece regardless? And then you have the game 3 days later where maybe you mix things up, that it could be Coleman, Egan and Collins potentially, even though that'd be pretty harsh on Darragh O'Shea, but it could be. And then you have Doherty on the right wing back, and then it is just O'Dowda. And that is possibly a scenario. I think they are the little marginal ones you're talking about, all things being equal. If everyone's fit, I don't think you're talking about a radical dramatic change in approach. But the team, again, this has been the problem for Ireland, the games where they probably have to impose themselves on it against a team that are of similar-ish ability, lesser ability by the rankings. Seem actually, if you look at Greece's record in recent years, it does seem to be not dissimilar to Ireland in that you can find positive evidence from some very good results against some good teams, like draws with Spain, but then they seem to have some very good in the Nations League last year, but prior to that they will have some bad results on their CV against average enough teams, and as we know, like, they will be seized upon as evidence. You should be beating these, and then from the flip side it's like, well, they drew with Spain, you know, this is a proper team, but you know, they're no Scotland.
Coleman's in a good place.
He is. I was writing about that today. I thought Coleman, I didn't think he was done in an Irish context, but I certainly thought the idea of him being a starter all the time was probably gone. And I'm not convinced he'll start every game for the remainder of this year, but I certainly found myself coming out the other night going, God, yeah, like, got bought into that a little bit too soon, because you step back from it. Like, the only Irish outfield players between now and the rest of the Premier League season who will definitely play, probably shame, as in every week, you know, the first choice for our clubs at the moment, would probably Coleman and Evan Ferguson. Nathan Collins is not playing regularly for Wolves. He's coming off the bench, and he, on form, he should have been in the team the other day, not just because of his presence or his experience or whatever. On form, if you go off form, and sometimes people can be too much of a form judge with the Irish stuff. You need a degree of continuity. But I think there's big arguments for Coleman being involved for the rest of the year, because Kenny has said himself he's probably overcome the injury problems that inhibited him last year. He feels like he played through the pain barrier a lot. Like he limped off in Yerevan last year when he probably played half injured and looked a shadow of himself, and that maybe makes you think, oh God, maybe this is the end. But I'm looking at this now going, Coleman, okay, I mean, I don't know how long he's going to go for, but I don't think it's unfair to suggest like this is his last crack at a major tournament. So he has that real sense of desperation, that sense of want. Not that they all have it, but he also has the experience of winning big international games that not a huge amount of that team do. Like even some of the older players, like Doherty and Egan, really haven't had too many big wins in an Ireland shirt.
What age is Coleman?
So Coleman is 35 later this year. He's 1980. Is he 30? No, he's 1988, I think. Yeah.
He is. Yeah, he would be.
Yeah.
Like, you look at his body type, I would suspect he's lived a very professional lifestyle. I wouldn't be shocked if he's still hanging around for another campaign after this at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
He'll go 35, 36.
No, I wouldn't rule it out. I'm just saying that I guess I'm sure there has to be a part of him when he sees all his contemporaries. Like when you think of like Coleman in Euro 2016, like he's actually a couple of years older than Robbie Brady, Hendrick, Shane Duffy. McLean is obviously still there, but the other ones are being sort of phased out or are still around the squad. Like even the likes of Conor Harahan now gone from this squad. Like there has been a sort of a, Darren Randolph, Shane Long. Like there's just been this sort of not necessarily just down with a knife on one day and that's it, but it's been steady. And Coleman is still going and he's still there and he's a big presence. I was struck by him vocally even the other night, even off the pitch at Ogbene at half time. Like I think Ogbene's performance, I'd say it was influenced by Coleman behind him a bit too, and like they were in a big debrief walking off at half time. And I think it just points to saying, do you know what, when it comes to these big games this year, you want to have him there. Now if he's not playing for his club at all, which has been the case at times in recent camps, well then you probably can't just justify someone's being there on the basis of their presence, but I think, like I said, the form argument is there. Like he did a good job in the game the other night that reminded you, like you have players in that Ireland squad who have never played in the Premier League, and Seamus Coleman may not be the Seamus Coleman he was, but he's still playing in the Premier League, and like that counts for a lot. The nature of Ireland's group and the teams they have to play, where you could easily be intimidated by some of them, than someone who's played whatever, hundreds of top flight games, and is doing so at the moment. I think he has to be there. And I've probably changed my view a little bit on that. I wasn't quite writing him out of it, but I sort of thought, no, it's going to be Doherty. Whereas now I think there's a real argument of you just have to find a way to accommodate Coleman.
I'd have Coleman over Doherty at the moment, for sure.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
For sure. Football show coverage brought to you by Sky. Catch the biggest live Premier League games every weekend on Sky Sports. Short ad break. We're talking Scotland's win over Spain next.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This is News Talk. Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, all the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
This is News Talk.
Now you're welcome back. Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent is here. Scotland 2, Spain 0 was the story last night. Have a listen.
In steps Tierney. Does well. He'll be chased down by Carvajal, but he's got some engine on him. Kieran Tierney, he timed that perfectly. Now, can he pick out the killer pass? There's McTominay! Oh, what a hit from Scott McTominay! What an effort from Kieran Tierney! But what a finish once again from McTominay! Listen to this place! Hampden Park is rocking once again! This is turning into a very special night!
Certainly was a special night. Scott McTominay. Oh, yes. I think he's a good player. I mean,
but again,
much ridiculed.
We ridicule someone who plays for Manchester United. I think we'd be quite happy with a Manchester United squad player.
We sure would. Goals on 7 and 51 minutes. Very happy to say Robert Grieve of the Scottish Sun is with us. You've put your top back on, you've calmed down, you're all the rest, you come back down to earth, Robert, or where are you?
Feet firmly on the ground, Joe. We're all very relaxed here in Scotland, no problem at all. It's a routine victory for Scotland that last night.
Well,
we're all very calm.
On to the next game. On to the next game, of course.
I tell you, I spoke to
Of course.
Yeah, I spoke to Robert.
Dan knows my feelings in Scotland. Always very calm when it comes to the Scottish national team. Feet in the ground, Dan. Is that right?
Listen, well, I spoke to Robert before the Ireland 3, Scotland 0
We
game.
don't talk about that game, Dan. Come on, with an agreement.
You predicted it. You were like, I'm not sure about this. And I'm kind of wondering how Scotland have gone from being that inconsistent team you couldn't trust to now being this ruthless, rolling around the pitch, wasting time, efficient, winning machine that does a job on an under strength, but still like good Spanish side.
Yeah, listen, still 10th in the world. I think Rodri had a bit of explaining to do after the game, and that was his out to say that Scotland were time wasted and described it as rubbish. Listen, Scotland deserved to win at Hampden last night. I don't think there's any doubt about it. The team played really, really well. And you're right, there's been a transformation in the team. Since Steve Clarke's come in, he's been in the job a few years now, and he's slowly but surely getting these players playing in a fashion that makes us competitive in these games against the best teams. We played well against Denmark. Previously, we beat them at Hampden. We've gone on the road and won in places like Austria. And here we are last night beating Spain. You're right, they aren't the team they once were. They're going through a bit of a transitional period with their new coach since the World Cup. We all know that. That's fair enough. But still, what a night it was for Scotland. What a performance. And it was fully deserved.
People listening might think Robert is paraphrasing Rodri when he says, Rodri said it was a bit rubbish. They were his exact quotes. For me, it's a bit rubbish. Always time wasting. They provoke you and they always fall. Cynical, the Scots. Dan, I've always said it. There's just a nasty underbelly to those boys.
They know how to win. I mean, like, this is the thing. Like, they haven't been in a tournament since, 1998 until the Euros. And now they've just gotten the hang of the whole thing. I mean, listen, in all seriousness, we obviously played...
I was being very serious.
Oh, I know. Oh, sorry. We played, like, Scotland twice last year.
Yeah.
And I know, like, okay, there was that win in Dublin. And then you had that game in Hampden, which was, like, actually a good game. Like, it was a good contest. But you are looking at Scotland going... Yeah, look, they're just a little bit ahead of where Ireland are, and you're thinking, yeah. I know it's obviously different when you're covering your own international team, and I'd imagine, like, even Steve Clarke, I think, has had a lot of criticism, even in the last 12 months. At times, you've sensed a little bit of a mixed vibe, but you sort of do look at them, and they're in a good place where presumably, Robert, even the taste of getting to one tournament. I don't know, does that just remove some kind of weight from the shoulders of that group as well? Yeah. That there's just a more natural expectation now that's not just this craving the end of this famine. It's something a little bit more different at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the wait for getting back to a major tournament was so long that has to take a weight off the shoulders when we get there. But the thing about that tournament, Dan, was that Scotland didn't perform. Barring the one game against England at Wembley, the team were terrific that night. We didn't win, but the team were terrific that night. But other than that, I think the players and certainly the manager, I know, came away from the Euros with a real tinge of disappointment at how the team performed, because we were better than I think we showed. It was the way the tournament, as you know, went with Hampden Park. It was kind of half empty, didn't suit, didn't help us either. But I think coming out of that tournament, I think the players got a real kind of determination to get back to that level. To get back to a major tournament again, and to make sure that it wasn't just a one-off after all those years of us trying to strive to get back to that level. So, listen, the thing about this campaign so far, this group so far, is Scotland have got off to a good start. Obviously, that's not usually what happens with Scotland. We're usually up against the kind of fighting against it from early on in a tournament, a campaign. And here we are, back-to-back wins against Cyprus and Spain. And the real mood of kind of positivity around the squad now, getting into the games in the summer against Norway and Georgia.
And it must be said as well, Robert, again, to draw the natural comparison with Ireland, similar population size, we would look at the Premier League and be really scratching around the fringes. Obviously very excited about Evan Ferguson's emergence, and Seamus Coleman is still hanging on, and there's Bazunu in goal, and then it starts to dry up very, very quickly. And at a glance, even at the Scottish 11 last night, you're talking Kieran Tierney, you're talking Andy Robertson, you're talking McTominay, you're talking McGinn, you're talking Ryan Christie. That is a very decent Premier League showing for a country of Scotland's size.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, these guys aren't playing every week. I think it's fair to say McTominay could probably be playing more football. Certainly Kieran Tierney could be playing more football. But when you look at these guys in the clubs, the environments they're in, when they're lining up against a Spain, they're not overawed by that. These guys are kind of facing these players week in and week out down in England, or they're certainly even playing with them or training with some of them. So I think there's been a change of kind of mentality within the group that they feel as though they belong and they're quite comfortable in that environment. Rodri spoke before the game. He was the Spanish player who spoke before the game on Monday night, and he was talking about Scott McTominay and having been up against Scott McTominay in the Manchester derbies. Now, Scott McTominay lined up in that game. He wasn't overawed about who he was facing, and that spreads throughout the team. We've got guys, you say Kieran Tierney, McTominay, other players. Callum McGregor's played Champions League football, so we've got guys now who are playing at the highest level, competing at the highest level, and don't get overawed by it.
So how is all this going to blow up horribly in your face then? What's going to go wrong?
Yeah, we're going to fail. We're going to fail in Georgia, obviously.
Georgia, yeah, it has to be Georgia.
Listen, we're joking about it, but the fact that Norway didn't win yesterday either was another great. I mean, even before Scotland kicked off last night, we had that boost that Norway had failed to win in Georgia. That was always going to be a tricky game for us. But the way it's shaping up now, you expect Spain are going to get their finger out, they're going to get their act together. But we're looking at Scotland can win in Cyprus, which you'd expect them to win. Then if they can win our home games, we might not have to go to Norway and win. We might not have to go to Spain to win, or even Georgia for that matter. Getting these 6 points on the board after 2 games puts us in such a strong position that it takes the pressure off. And as I said, in previous European Championships qualifiers, we've been behind it. We've been chasing our tails after the first couple of games because we don't usually go off to a good start. I think the Cyprus victory on Saturday was the first time we've won an opening game in a group since 2006. We tend to go off to a slow start. So the players have got off to a positive start. They've got the victory against Cyprus, the victory against Spain, and suddenly there's so much positivity. The team play Norway next in June in Oslo. It's a huge game. But there was no fear going over to Norway. All right, they might have Erling Haaland, might be back for them. There may be a different proposition from what they've been in their game so far. But Scotland will go there with no fear. And you say that it might. Listen, we know we've not qualified. Steve Clarke was at pains to point out last night that no team's ever qualified with 6 points. That's all we've got is 6 points just now. But there's a real feeling that this could be a real positive campaign for Scotland, given what we saw last night.
I'll bet, and it's not built on nothing. I know last year it ended in disappointment with the defeat to Ukraine in the playoff. Yeah. However, it was quite striking looking in from afar. There was such a vibrancy about Hampden. There was an energy about the place. There was a feel-good factor. Everybody loves Ali McCoist on co-commentary. You know, who knows why these things are important, but somehow they play into it. But there was just a sense of this is not a miserable Scotland scene anymore. There is a vibrancy to it. What? Aside from good results, I guess, do you put that down to Clarke? Do you put that down to this generation of players got something about them as people, or what?
Joe, it's a mixture of both. Yeah. Clarke's come in and he's not the most. He can be quite dour. He says himself he can be quite a dour character, so it doesn't come from that side of things. But he's a very, very shrewd manager. He's a very shrewd coach. The players like working with him. He gets the team set up in a way that each player in the squad, not just the guys who start the game, but each player knows their job to the detail. So that's a huge part of it. But as we touched on before, we've got guys playing at a good level now. We've got guys who've amassed a decent amount of caps in the last few years. We've got a mixture. We've got a few inexperienced players. Ryan Porte's played, I think, his third cap against Spain last night. He's yet to concede a goal in a Scotland jersey. You know, he came in, he played against the Austria game, I think it was. He's yet to concede a goal. He's gone down to Watford. He's taken his career on a bit in the last few months. So we've got younger players there, but as I say, we've got guys here who've been over the course and distance before for the last number of years. John McGinn's picked up a serious amount of caps. Andy Robertson's picking up a serious amount of caps. We've got, as you say, McTominay's getting into those kind of numbers. So that spreads right through the team, and that gives and you say as well, these guys are playing a tournament also. So there is no reason why they shouldn't be confident when they're playing against these bigger teams.
Very good. Well, look, we're thrilled for you.
Yeah. Dan isn't. I know Dan isn't.
I'm actually not unhappy.
Come on, tell the truth.
I actually am telling the truth now. Like, I think since the Scots, bizarrely, I think the Scots, since they've qualified for a tournament, they've developed a little bit more humility. So I actually don't feel as...
Dan, you always go on about this humility because we talk our team up. I think you have to have a little bit more confidence in your own team, maybe. That's all we are. We just back our boys to get results. It's not about humility.
Yeah, like, you don't have a track record of getting carried away early in a campaign and booking flights to France in 2016 and stuff like that. But no, I think Scotland's major tournament wait was a real anomaly. Like, it shouldn't, like, for a football mad country to be that long away from the top table is absurd, really. Like, it was. I mean, there was a sort of, like, from the outside, you could sort of laugh at it sometimes because it seemed to be this tragicomedy all the time. It's just, what can go wrong? But now they're in their sort of their winning phase. I don't find it that,
and you know,
rating, to be honest.
Akin to ourselves in a way. There were probably an unlucky generation of Scotland fans who came of age just after 98 and went from bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and into middle age without getting to have their big fun experience away.
Yeah, listen, you're joking aside, there's a generation of Scotland fans who just don't know what it was like to get to tournaments. I mean, when I was growing up, we got to tournaments almost every time. The World Cup, I think we got to 5 in the bounce in the 80s and 90s. That was the norm.
Was it 5 on the bounce? That's some going.
Extraordinary. Even England didn't do that around that time, did they?
No, they missed 94.
And 74, 78, yeah. It's incredible.
5 in the bounce. Wow, okay. And as a final thought, do the Scottish Union, or the Scottish FA, excuse me, we can talk about Scottish rugby another time, Robert, and another bastion of humility. Do the FA get thumbs up credit? Did they take huge credit for bringing through this, let's not call it a golden generation, but very, very solid generation? Or where are they in the eyes of observers and this success?
No, I don't think you can give the FA too much credit for what's going on, if I'm being brutally honest with you. I think Steve Clarke and the players deserve all the credit for what's happening with the results at the minute. As I say, it's been a slow, steady progress. When Clarke came in, it wasn't overnight success. He's had to kind of work at it. But no, I put it entirely down to him, his staff and the players, most of all, actually.
Yeah,
okay.
I think some of their underage results haven't been terrific in the last while. So
I've been put at that level, Dan.
Yeah,
really put at that level.
I think, so basically what we're saying is our underage results are okay. 5-6 years time, we're coming for you, Scotland.
So we're saying, Dan, this is
enjoy it while you have it.
This is a one-off, unsustainable, lucky, golden-ish generation, but we have foundations in place.
Oh, it's coming. I understand. They'll be covering us again.
You can sense the jealousy here, Robert. But
I can hear it in your voices. It's great, fantastic.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. See you.
Pleasure.
All right, Robert Grieve there of the Scottish, who you told us get on Robert, by the way.
So
people sensed a certain familiarity there.
We have a bit of it's to do with that 2016 campaign. There was a lot of back and forth around.
Did he book his
Irish
flights for France?
Not quite, but I think a lot of the Scottish players basically mentally did when they drew in the Aviva that time in 2015.
Yeah.
So it was kind of funny. There was a few Scottish lads, not Robert, were sent over for the Ireland-Germany game.
Yeah.
And we were watching Scotland collapse in Georgia, but then Ireland beating Germany was not, like, we remember a Shane Long night in Scotland. It was like, how has this happened? How have they done this?
Hampden has an atmosphere.
It was terrific for even the game in September, the Nations League game, but it felt like almost not quite at Monday night's level because it didn't have the nervous energy, but it had the actual, just the energy of a big match feel, and just it's an old venue. Some would say the facilities aren't great, and they're not, but it probably, there's a certain sort of even the walk up to the ground where it's located.
Is it
the bowl
central?
Shaped? It's actually a bit of a train ride from the city centre, but it's just in a sort of a built-up area, and there's obviously probably an established, all the businesses around it. Everyone goes to football stadium. Now the place probably is actually, it's a little bit dilapidated, or it's probably past its sell by date, but it doesn't really matter because it has that bowl-shaped atmosphere, and it's just it's really a really good place to go. And as I said, like, it is, like, I've what I'm envious of Scotland sometimes is their football culture, in the sense of the culture of attending games that does exist, that even even though we're looking at the Premier League, where the players are, even how the game is covered there, and it's a proper industry, and I think we can take a lot from Scotland in some ways. So it was weird, when we don't have any of that here. Really, you don't have any proper.
Interesting point. Yeah.
That Ireland were qualifying for tournaments and they weren't. Like, they have the highest per capita attendances in Europe. Now, obviously, Celtic and Rangers helps, but even like the clubs further down the SPL, would have like Hibs, Hearts, big clubs. And Sligo Rovers beat Motherwell last summer. Like, the European results aside, the top clubs wouldn't be very good, but there's just a great genuine sort of passion for the game. Like, it is proper like football country. So that it didn't get, like, when you think about it, you mentioned the generation of fans who, even they got to the COVID tournament, I know they had a little bit of a half-life, but actually for them to get to Germany, would be 26 years on from 98. They would be incredible there. They're in a hell of a group, by the way, as well.
Yeah, a question actually I should have asked Robert. So I and maybe Scottish viewers, if you're on YouTube, you can let us know, because it's been in effect 1998 since they were at a big tournament. I've no sense of what the Scottish fans are like. I mean, I'm tempted, because there are Celtic brethren, to say they've got that happy-go-lucky Irish quality, but then I don't know, is there a Celtic Rangers thing within that clashes, or is it all a happy family? I don't know.
I don't want to speculate on that. I think it is one of those where, like, obviously a lot of Celtic fans would have an affiliation to Ireland in some cases, and it's probably one where a lot of Scottish fans of other clubs as well, but not quite like England, where people would say a lot of the national team fans are not fans of the big Premier League clubs, if you know what I mean. But I'm not qualified enough to sort of to say. But they are, like, they do have a reputation. Like this is the thing, they've had so many brave near misses in terms of playoffs and stuff. There was that time where I think they beat Holland 1-0 in the first leg and got done 7-0 in the return or something. Yeah. And like, the buzz around generated by their fans would have been quite something. And anyone, I'm sure there's people listening or watching who were in Hampden last year, and it was like a sense of, this is a good game. And in fact, there was that sort of weird thing that after Ireland played Scotland, we were all in the airport the next day flying to go to Poland to play Ukraine. But all the Scots were on their way to Yerevan to play Armenia. And like the Irish and Scots fans were in the airport. In fact, they were on the same flights over. And it was all good.
Yeah, that would be my sense.
Yeah, it was all good. It was all very like, you did us 3-0 last night, but there was a sort of a shared sense of a bit of an affinity there. But look, we played them. I mean, the mad thing about it is their group is a tough one. I'd say it's probably we'd like to say our group is the best one, but I would say probably they've got three really good teams. They've got Spain, they've got Scotland, and they've got Norway. And Haaland didn't play in the first two games. The thing about it is, without going into it in great detail, strong chance that if Ireland do end up in a playoff, they're likely to end up in the same bracket as whatever team doesn't emerge from that group. So it could be Ireland, Scotland, or Ireland, Norway.
It would be Stephen Kenny's luck just to get Spain.
Well, no, so I would be less likely to be Spain. I'm thinking Spain are going to qualify, but Scotland and Norway are quite close to us. Oh, of course it would be. Yeah, no. Actually, it's not. Yeah,
let's take it France.
Yeah, and get Spain. But we could be seeing them again. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Okay, we got to take a short break. Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent with us.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
This is News Talk.